Welcome back to another episode of HTM On The Line. I'm your host, Bryant Hawkins Sr. And you know, in this HTM industry, titles and roles might change. BMed, manager, director, regional leader. But what doesn't change is the weight we carry. Keeping hospitals safe, reliable, and ready for every patient who walks through those doors. Today's guest is living proof of what happens when you stop trying to do everything alone and start learning to lead people. Eric Massey went from factory floors to becoming a regional director overseeing half the country. But more than that, he discovered that leadership isn't about grinding yourself into the ground. It's about developing people, managing your time, and leaving a legacy. This conversation will challenge you to stop surviving and start leading. Let's get into it. All right, we live here with another episode of HTM On The Line. I have a very special guest this week. I have Mr. Eric Massey. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Brian?
Doing great, man. Great for you to come on here. Now, Eric, a lot of people know you in the industry, but for a few who don't, let's just give them a little background of how you came into the HTM industry. Just give us a little background on you.
All right. Well, how I came in, I didn't know anything about the HTM industry. I was actually working in a factory and going to school at night for electronic engineering. And a gentleman walked in to my school one night, Dave Harrington, and said, hey, kid, you want to come fix medical equipment? And I said, sure. Why not? And that's how I got into the HTM field. I entered the field in the year 2000 with a company called Technology and Medicine based out of Holliston, Massachusetts. And, I was an entry-level BMet when I entered the field. And I quickly worked my way up to a manager's role by the year 2007. I had a hybrid role at a small community hospital in Putnam, Connecticut. And, after that, I managed a few other hospitals, and then I got my first, multi-hospital system role in the year 2014. And, I managed those up until 2021. I built out about 3 or 4 programs at some large hospital systems in the Northeast and in the Southeast. And, that led to my role that I currently have now, which is, regional director of operations over field service. I moved into that role in 2021, and I currently oversee the Western U.S. and Florida.
Oh, man, that's great, man. Congratulations on a great career so far.
Thank you. I love this industry.
You in a leadership role, as you just mentioned. What would you say is one of your biggest leadership challenges you had to face?
I say my biggest leadership challenge, getting everyone to, understand their roles, managing large hospital systems, like I do right now. I manage a large region, half the country, rolls up under me. You have to have standardized processes in place, and you really got to get everyone to know their roles, and, everyone has to function and do their role for that to be a successful program. But when you get everyone trained, everyone understanding your processes, you're going to have a very successful system. But yeah, that's probably the most difficult thing, is getting everyone in line and getting standardization with the processes.
Okay, great. Now you mentioned you've been in the leadership role since 2014. What would you think would be, I guess you would say, is one of your most defining moments that kind of created the leadership style you have today? Is there a defining moment that happened to you that you could think of?
Yeah, I used to always think that I had to do everything, myself. And, I never really got any real leadership training when I was younger. I was just a high performing tech, that got thrown into leadership position. And, I always thought working more, was what I had to do. That kind of broke me down. And, in 2020, I ended up having, some panic attacks, which at the time I thought were heart attacks that actually put me into the hospital. And actually, the funny story when this actually, well, it wasn't funny, but a little funny when the doctor came in and, said, I thought I was having a heart attack, and I'm sitting in the ER, and he walks in and he goes, "We figured out what's wrong with him." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "This." And he looks over at me, and I'm sitting there in the ER, and I have my computer open with an HDMI cable into the monitor in the ER, double screens going. He's sitting there, he's like, "This is your issue. It's work. You're overdoing it." And, it was stress related issues. And he's like, "If you don't make life changes now, this is eventually, going to kill you." And at that time, I was working nonstop. I was running 2 large hospital systems, one in South Carolina, one in Florida, at the time. And I was running myself into the ground. That's when I started studying, personal development and, learning to manage myself, manage my time, and then also, learning to develop others. So I would have to say that was the defining moment on, where I get my leadership, style today was from that instance in 2020. That was a real wake up call for me. I don't want to die at a young age. And I've learned a lot since then on how to manage myself and other people. And I no longer have any stress related issues like that. I'm in really, really good shape. I manage my time well. I empower my people, and, I run some really good programs now.
Great, man. Now, since you've shared a personal story, let's just stay personal for a minute. I know you're a very passionate guy. Well, what keeps you motivated after all these years you've been in the HTM industry? Especially since you had the situation with your panic attacks. What is it that keeps you motivated and passionate?
I mean, this industry, I love it. You never know what you're going to do. It's different every day. That's one of the things that keeps me motivated, the constant change, in this industry. But the real thing I'd say, that keeps me motivated is, developing people. I love coaching people. I love developing my directors. I love developing techs, imaging engineers. That's what really made it, is building out these programs, developing people, and then, watching them, succeed in this amazing industry that we work in.
Yes, exactly. Now, do you have any habits or routines that help you stay sharp as a leader or motivator, innovator? Do you have any habits or routines you follow?
Yes, absolutely. I own my mornings. If you talk to any one of my directors, I preach this all the time, is own your mornings. So, my typical day, I wake up at 4:00 in the morning. I immediately take a cold shower, to wake up, energize my body. I get a little bit of movement. And then for the first hour of that day, I do personal development. I journal, I read. I look into my day about how I want to come into that day, with attention. And then the first thing that I do is I block the first 3 hours of my morning, and I shut off my phone. I have my work focus on there, no phone calls, no emails. And my top task of the day get completed in that work block in the morning. And then right after that work block, I have time scheduled then, to answer my emails, phone calls, text messages at that time. I don't let them distract me. And, what that does, that's a big win going into your day, getting your most important task completed in the morning. And a lot of people in this industry say, "Oh, I can't just shut my phone off or block this." I'm like, it's no different than being in a QBR or some type of meeting. You're not going to answer your call in that. That's what you're getting paid to do, is, to do these tasks in the morning. You need to get that completed. And then when you answer your phone calls in that block, you're more prepared once you get to look at it, and you're really not wasting the other person's time either when you're just answering the phone reactively. So, that's one habit that I teach and that I do that's very sacred to me.
Let's cold shower.
Yeah, cold shower.
Why a cold shower, man?
Resets your nervous system. It resets your nervous system.
Okay.
It's the same thing as a cold plunge. Sit under there for about 5 minutes, and you come out, you're awake in the morning after that.
Yeah, I guess that's true with athletes. They jump in those cold baths
Yep.
to recover quickly. So I can see where it'll shock you. It'll wake you up. I'm more than sure it do.
Yeah. I
Now,
mean, if I had a rough night of sleep, I'll do a cold shower in the middle of the day. If I feel myself getting tired and I'm working from home, I'll take 10, 15 minutes and do that. And it wakes you back up for a couple hours. It works.
oh man. Now you mentioned how you love to develop your leaders. And by just looking at this HTM industry that we both love so dearly, how do you feel that, what area, I guess I should say, what's one area maybe you can share that you think HTM professionals are undervalued in healthcare? If you had to pick one area.
Are undervalued?
Yeah, not appreciated like they should.
I'd say, we're sort of the invisible people. I think we kind of do get unnoticed, in the hospitals, but, our technicians are keeping these hospitals running, whether it's IV pumps or, keeping that OR up and running. But we're also more than just repair technicians. We provide a lot of data, to these hospitals, to make informed decisions, for capital replacement and, to run their programs. We're a lot more than, break fix. And I think that goes unnoticed is, the amount of data that we can provide to these hospitals to help, drive decisions on getting them the appropriate, equipment to use in their facilities and to save money. I think a lot of that goes unnoticed.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good answer. Mm-hmm. Now, let's dabble a little bit into this new initiative you're doing. What is this new initiative that has you extremely excited that's outside your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I'm starting the Massey Method. This is a leadership development and coaching business that I'm starting on the side here. And the passion for this comes back to what we talked about earlier in, 2020, where, I was never given that leadership development when I was younger. And then, I'm lucky to have, a great boss in Lisa Fry, who ended up getting me a life coach through our company. And I had that life coach for 6 months, and that got me, I was getting coached on time management, empowering people. I just felt in love with that. And I'm like, this is what this industry is missing. We teach people, policies, procedures, how to run the database, and it's, just go. No one ever looks at the mental health aspect of what it takes to be an actual leader for this industry and any industry. So, I really started developing a passion for that. And after my 6 months was up with that program that my company offered, I went and bought myself my own coach. I through Brendan Bouchard's Growth Day, I have a coach every Wednesday, which I met with earlier today at 2:00. I do an hour session every single week. And yeah, just what I've taught, it's developed a passion. And I want to take everything that I learned through this coaching, and, I want to teach that to our industry. I teach it to my directors, and some of my technicians that are looking to move into leadership roles. But I want to start, teaching our industry about time management, managing themselves, and all these personal development tools that I've learned through coaching.
Oh, that's amazing, man. Because there's definitely a gap in our industry for,
yes,
like I've heard people have leadership programs, and so yours is not just strictly about HTM work. It's coaching them to do what else? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
This is coaching them. It's teaching you how to manage yourself. I have 4 modules that are created, and 3 of them are for the HTM side, build and service delivery plans, looking at finances, capital planning, all those things that, are very important to a director's role. But the very, very first module in my mind is the most important module of all. And that's understanding yourself, building out that morning routine, that I talked about, understanding influence and how to develop your team. So what I'm looking to do, over a course of 6 weeks in a leadership program is to fully transform someone from a reactive role, being a reactive director to being a true leader and understanding how to own your time, manage your time, because ultimately, once you understand how to manage yourself, you're going to be able to manage people so much better, and you're going to be so much better to your customer. So, that first module that I'm going to be offering that's coming out in January, that's going to be fully transformational for people that take that course.
And what advice would you give to an HTM professional who's trying to advance in the HTM industry? I mean, whether it's a leadership role or an executive role, what type of how can an HTM professional move into this? Will your coaching help them to want to aspire to those type of roles?
Yes, I believe it absolutely will. Because people that get thrown in these roles right now, it's overwhelming sometimes. If you don't know how to manage your time and manage yourself, you're going to get overwhelmed really quick. And, there was an article I read in July that, 60% of first time managers fail. And it's because they don't get the appropriate leadership training where you need to learn how to manage yourself, manage your time, and how to manage people. So yes, by taking this course, I feel I'm going to make people ready to go and move into, that HTM director's role that they're looking to get into. And this is also for people that are currently in director roles. And, if you're feeling like you're burned out, you're struggling, and, you probably need to take this course or get some coaching. You never can get enough training and never enough coaching. I love having my coach. I feel I'm doing very, very well now, but, I still get a lot of value meeting with her every single week.
Oh, that's great. Now, in your experience, what unique challenges do you say HTM professionals face that other industries might not? If you had to say
that other industries might not, it might be a lot easier for other industries to sit there and do the block time, that I speak of, because we do have devices that go down and emergencies that come up and things that you do need to get involved in. So that's where our industry is, a little more unique in that I have to work with, and everyone's situation for whatever role they're in is unique. I like to block 3 hours at a time in the morning, and that works for me in my current role, but there might be an on-site director that has certain meetings. I'll work with them to, structure around their schedule. So maybe they block, their first 90 minutes in the morning, but then do a second block later in the afternoon for 90 minutes. But, the ultimate goal is to teach them how to, run their calendar and own that time. And then, tune out when you do have those blocks, tune out the text messages and phone calls. As a director, if you have the right processes in place for when a call comes in, you don't need to be involved. You have a team that's able to handle, those calls for you. So you can focus on your work.
Okay, man. I want you to give out one nugget. I know this is going to be one of Eric's free gifts to everyone listening. If someone feels stuck in their HTM role, what's the first step you recommend they take?
If they're stuck in their HTM role, what's the first step that they take?
You recommend, right? What would you recommend they do?
I mean, you got to find something you like. If you don't like your current role, each person that's different. I mean, I recommend, going to the MD Expos and all these events and having a large group of people that you can talk to. Cause, then when you're stuck in your role, you can reach out, see what other opportunities are out there, and the right people to reach out and talk to. So, if you feel stuck in your role, I would start going to your local biomed shows. Like I got Cabinet here in Colorado that I go to, MD Expo, Amy. You have to build a network of people, and that way, when you get stuck, it gives you options, and you have people to reach out to talk to and get advice.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned Lisa Fry is a great mentor to you.
Yes.
In your opinion, what does a healthy mentor-mentee relationship look like?
They listen, and they let you be who you are. That's how Lisa has always been to me. She's never tried to change me. She let me be the person that I am, and she listens to the things that I have to say, and then she gives me guidance. She's not trying to change me, but she gives advice. So that's the same thing with the coach. You're not there to direct people and say, hey, you got to change this, you got to do this. You let them make the decisions for themselves. You ask the right questions, you listen to their unique situation, you push them in the right direction. That's that healthy relationship that you get from a coach and a mentor. And that's what I had, from Lisa, and still have.
Great. Awesome. Man, I can hear the passion in you when you talk about this coaching venture. So what have you learned about yourself in starting something new like this?
I've learned that I think I'm pretty good at developing people. Since I've started this, since I've been getting coaching, everything I've learned, I've taken back to my team, and I started developing them. And yeah, I realized I really have a passion for teaching. I didn't really know that before. I love building out programs. Building out the program was one of my favorite things. Doing startups, I love startups, but since I started the coaching and then taking that and implement it with my teams, I've really learned about myself is that I have a true passion, for developing people. And, I've been getting really good feedback, from some of my directors on the coaching, and saying that not only has it changed, their work life, but it's also changed their home life, because they're having a better work-life balance now too. And, that really makes me feel good, hearing those stories.
Oh, man, you took my next question. I was thinking of asking you about this coaching venture you're doing. I wanted to ask you, what hope you think this may have on the next generation of HTM professionals? What you hope this venture would do for them?
What's my hope? What this venture will have? Honestly, I'm hoping to change the industry and the way that we develop leaders. I'm hoping that people, look at my free webinar and take that, with MD Expo, and go to my presentations at MD Expo and Amy and, Colorado Biomed or California Biomed, wherever I'm presenting. And they see these programs that I'm building, and they either, utilize me, or they go build their own program, and they start paying more attention to the time management, the personal development, side of leadership development. Cause, I think if we make that, a mandatory field in our development of our directors, that's going to be so much better for the industry. We're just going to build better directors. They're going to be better for their employees and better for the customers. And it's just going to make HTM better. So, I really hope people, come to some of my presentations and classes and get something out of this. And, I'm looking to change the industry in the way we develop people.
What advice do you give to young professionals about standing out when applying for their first HTM job? What advice would you give them?
Me, when I interview people, I look at how they act. I look for hungry people that are willing to learn. I honestly, I don't look at their education part of their resume. I like the conversation piece, because I know the industry very well. I was a technician, so I was certified on every device. Like I said, I manage everything from community hospitals to large hospital systems to a large field service division. So I know the right questions to ask to test their knowledge. But you can always train knowledge, but you can't train that motivation and that enthusiasm, that drive. And especially if you're going to be managing a large hospital system, that has, 5 to 10 facilities, you have to have that drive to take something on, that's big like that. So that's the thing when you're coming into that interview. Be confident and, let that drive stand out, because that's what I look for, because everything else is coachable.
Yes, that's what I say, man. You give me the will and I'll teach you the skill.
Exactly.
Now, I know you've managed a lot of individuals in your career. What is one of the most rewarding success stories you've seen from someone you've coached? in HTM?
From someone I coached in
Yeah.
HTM, I mean, some of the imaging engineers from Florida are, my favorites. Steve Sanchez sticks out from Florida. I remember him working on, a bed back in, was that 2018. He helped out with the Nuke Med camera and ended up fixing it. And, he had a photographic memory, could, read any manual, and immediately threw him into imaging training, and just to watch how quickly, he picked up on things. And I actually got to see him a couple weeks ago. Him and Bill Masters were here in Colorado and got to go for a hike. And it was good to spend, some time with him, to see him, where he is now in his career and where he's come from in, just a short amount of time. And yeah, I mean, I've worked with you too, and like seeing you where you are and everything that you're doing in your career. I mean, I didn't coach you on how to do podcasts. You're more coaching me on how to do that. But, me and you have also, worked together, and, I love seeing all the success, that you have in this industry. Jennifer Chester, she's another person that, works with me currently down in Houston, watching all the great things that she's doing in this industry. Yeah. So, that's a few of them, but I mean, I could go on all day talking about people.
Okay. Yeah.
There's been a lot over the last 25 years here.
Yeah.
So
What advice would you give to your younger self when you first stepped into the HTM industry? What could you tell young Eric Massey if you can give him some advice?
you don't have to do everything yourself. Slow down, take care of yourself, pay attention to your health, eat right, work out, spend time outdoors, and look into some leadership trainings on how to manage yourself first. Because, once you understand yourself and know how to manage yourself, you're going to be able to manage others a lot better. That's the number one advice I'd give to myself. I've always been go, 100 miles an hour, always thought I had to do everything on my own. And that's the one thing, that I would change. I'd still obviously want that motivation that I had to jump on every opportunity that came up, like I did. Something opens up in Florida, it's like, bam, I'm going to go there and take that. I don't ever want to change, that, but it's the working all night, all weekend, giving up holidays, family time, all that. It's just not needed if you manage your time right and manage yourself.
Yeah. Now, if you can give, if you could challenge our listeners to take one action today to level up their careers, what would it be?
To level up their careers. So if you're a director, block your morning, own your morning. That's what I would give to any director. If you get those first tasks done in the morning with no distractions, it is going to change your life. That's what you got to do for the director's role. If you're a young tech growing in this industry, not quite sure where you're going to be heading in your career, MD Expo, go to MD Expo, go to every trade show that you can go to, network with people, understand who's who, understand what's going on. And that will lead you to where you need to be. So that's the advice I would give.
Now, when people look back years from now, what do you want the name Eric Massey to stand for in the HTM industry?
For leadership development, I think I found a passion here, that I have is, developing, leaders. I still got a lot of years left in this industry. I want to use those years now. The first half of my career was developing myself and building myself up. And now I want to pass that knowledge on from the last 25 years and through the coaching I've been getting. And that's what I want to be known for. I want to, when I leave this industry, I want to have a bunch of people across the country running, large healthcare systems, or this is for vendors too, vendors running great programs, or even if I'm coaching, hospital management, that they're running, effective programs in their facilities. I want to be known, for developing people and giving back.
Awesome, man. Well, Eric, man, I really appreciate you coming on here, man. And you're welcome to come back anytime you got any other ventures coming out. You want to come share with us, man, I'll be glad to. I'll do anything I can to help you. I appreciate you, brother. Wish you much success in your future ventures.
Thank you. I always wish you success. I love watching everything that you're doing, Brian. You do amazing things in this industry.
Thank you, brother. What I love about Eric's story is this. He didn't just build programs, he built people. He learned the hard way that burning yourself out isn't leadership, empowering others is. If you take anything away from this episode, it's this. Own your mornings, invest in yourself, and develop the next generation. That's how we elevate this industry. Because at the end of the day, HTM isn't just about equipment uptime. It's about human impact. Thanks for turning in to HTM On The Line. I'm your host, Bryant Hawkins Sr., reminding you that the unseen doesn't mean unimportant. It means you're built to make a difference. Y'all be safe out there.